started, thank you so much for joining us here at The Right Fit. Get hired and staff your proposal team. We have had a staffing change. Olivia was unable to join us today, and so instead we've got a surprise guest for you who I'm very excited to introduce. First time joining us for a PI event. But before we get started, what I'd love to let everybody know is that if you've got comments, questions, words of wisdom throughout this entire experience, please drop them in the chat or in the Q&A, because I will be monitoring those actively throughout the discussion. So if you have something that you'd like to ask the panelists as we're discussing this today, please don't be shy. As always, your opinions and thoughts are really important to us. What we're going to talk a little bit about today is, number one, proposal careers. So why do we care about joining into the proposal industry? What types of skills will make us really strong proposal leaders and proposal employees? And then how to think about getting a role in the industry and how that information will flow into staffing your team as a manager. So we're talking from all the way at the beginning when you're deciding to get into that proposal career field, how to land the next role of your dreams, what your hiring managers are looking for, and then how to staff your team up once you get into that leadership role. So what I'd love right now is for our panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves. My name is Catherine Bennett. I am a co-founder of PI. I just assumed y'all knew me as soon as we joined on, but let's go ahead and kick it over to Tracy and Kimberly to tell us a little bit about themselves. So Tracy, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Argandona. I'm here in Northern Virginia, where luckily it's not quite snowing yet, but it's freezing. I run the Proposal Development Center for Guidehouse. I joined Guidehouse about 2 months ago after spending 16 years at AECOM. Before I was at AECOM, I was at a very small company before they got acquired by AECOM. And I've spent most of my 20+ year career at large companies, but I've also worked at companies as small as 8 employees, where I was actually employee number 8 for a short period of time. So I have experience on large, medium, and small proposal teams, working for primarily the public sector, but also some commercial markets as well. So I've looked for a lot of jobs, I've hired a lot of people, and I've learned a lot about recruiting and interviewing teams and providing people with career paths along the way.
Thanks, Tracy. Kimberly, go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Kimberly Spencer. I'm actually located in Northern California, and I currently am running the proposal department at GoGuardian, which is an ed tech firm nationwide. So I've spent about the last 10 years working in a variety of verticals, including state and local governments, private sector. Most currently, I'm working in education technology, which is great. And also most currently, we are hiring a brand new team. So we just went through all of these activities that I think Tracy and I will kind of hit on and go over. And it's exciting to be able to be on the other side of it also.
I think that's what's so important about joining into conversations like this is, for so many people, we don't have good insight into how to hire the right folks. And then if we get the wrong folks on board, or if we don't have a good experience, then it can be really difficult for us to advocate for more staffing moving forward in the future, right? So we want to lay that positive foundation. Before we get ready to kick off our entire presentation today, I am going to launch a poll right now. And I would love for you to tell us, if you're joining us today, are you here to look for a new role? Are you looking to hire, or are you looking for a little bit of both? And that poll is live right now. We have 33 participants. Wow. And I'm seeing that we are skewing very heavily here towards looking to, well, not very heavily, looking to hire. But looking to hire and looking for a new role. So the looking for a new role is only 1/3. Somebody who's also looking to hire and looking for a new role is 2/3. So we're definitely in the right group. What do y'all think about that?
I was there a couple months ago. You know, I was in a position where I was trying to build up my current team while I wasn't sure if I was going to be there for the long term. So I feel you. All right, so let's get started. And if we can go to the next slide. Yep. So proposal careers, why? There is something about proposal careers that it's strangely appealing. So in the next slide, you know, nobody I don't think, went to school and came out of college and said, I want to be a proposal manager when I grow up. I don't think any of us even knew what that meant. I mean, I did know one person who said, I want to go get an advanced degree in government contracting. And I looked at her like she was crazy because I didn't get it. I get it now. You know, that's directly adjacent to what we do. So it's actually a great skill set to have. But that was a rarity, right? So what is it about these jobs? You know, there's no formal program. A lot of people don't know they exist. Most of us got here by accident, right? I certainly did. I went to law school. I left halfway through. I was lucky enough to find a neighbor who needed a technical writer to help her as she was growing her business. So part of the time I was helping her edit a big EIS. The rest of the time I was helping her with her proposals. And so I was on that role for a while. And then I moved into a bigger company, essentially doing the same thing. But a lot of us, you know, we needed a job. Proposal jobs don't always require directly relevant experience. You know, there's a lot of jobs that are adjacent where you have similar skills. Some people are making a transition. Some of the great proposal writers I worked with at AECOM were actually environmental scientists who got tired of doing field work. You know, they didn't want to travel. They didn't want to wear those, you know, crazy suits all the time, all the PPE over their high heels or whatever. And so they wanted to come in the office. And so they were able to apply their subject matter knowledge of the science work on the proposals. Others, maybe they started as a temp or an intern and they did a great job. And so the company kept them around, but none of us really went out, I think, and we're looking for this as a career path. So why are we still here? Next slide. I'd say there's a few reasons that are different. You know, it's the appeal is different for everybody, but the four that I've really kind of latched onto are they're always in demand, which means you've got stability and employment. They open the doors to a lot of opportunities by giving you on-the-job training and a lot of skill sets and an ability to network across the organization. And because the job can be somewhat of a thankless role sometimes, you know, you have people you work with who are like, I can't believe you do proposals all day long. I hate proposals. You're like, more power to you. I'm so impressed that you do it. You know, when most of the people in your company look at you as like doing this hero's job, if you can do a good job at it, you can get paid pretty well for what you do. And again, it opens a lot of doors. I've known people who have wanted to get into a company because they wanted to be a consultant. They got in the door as a proposal writer or coordinator, and then, you know, they moved into consulting roles, either onto a communications team, as a graphic designer, as a technical editor, et cetera. Next. So what are some clues for people to know that you might do well with proposals as a career? Are you organized? Do you like to check things off your to-do list? Do you like work that is project-based and with a firm start and stop dates? I used to joke that I had ADD because, you know, that was why a proposal was appealing to me. You know, if I got tired of what I was doing, 30 days later, I'd be over and I'd be on to the next one. So I never had to deal with anything that dragged out for a long time until I got, you know, into a management position, and then we had corporate initiatives to deal with, but that's a different story. A lot of these positions are good for people who are happy working as part of an internal service. One of the last jobs I had before I came back to proposals full time was working as part of a project management office for a government client that always operated on an emergency basis. You can probably figure out which one that was. And you know, they would request things from us with crazy deadlines. You know, I'd be the only one there getting the phone call at 4:30 on a Friday that they needed something by 8 o'clock on Monday. And when it's your client, you can't tell people they're crazy, but when you all work for the same company and they come with you to you with ridiculous deadlines, you're in a better position to tell them, like, this is not reasonable. We are going to agree on a better time frame for this. If you like to write and edit and you can tell the difference between bad writing and good writing, you might be a good proposal writer. If you like to work on a team And especially if you like to win, this could be a good career for you. That's another one of the reasons that I have stayed with this for so long. I like winning. It's great. I think we all do. And it's a fun part of the job to me. Let's go to the next one.
Real quick, I wanted to see if Kimberly wanted to weigh in on any of these too. Do you agree that, or are there any other components here that you would add?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep in mind that you can also use proposals as a jumping forward point, right? Like if you are interested in one of these adjacent kind of roles, like solutions engineering or graphic design or something like that, like this can also function as a really great segue, maybe if you don't have some of the certificates or a specific experience for maybe graphic design and you need to exercise that a little bit more. Like this is a great way to do that and oftentimes a very collaborative environment.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more depth in the next section, right, Tracy? Okay, I just wanted to kind of get Kimberly's temperature check on that as well. So, okay, great.
Yep.
There we go. Next slide.
Okay, so what are some things you want to look for when you're looking for a proposal role? So one thing that I like to look at is where does the proposal team fit within the company's organizational structure? You may have a very different experience if you're part of a proposal and marketing team, as opposed to if you're oriented more with the sales team. And what do I mean by that's different? If you're part of a marketing team for a services company, you may have more work that's within your responsibility than only proposals. And so you might be doing events, marketing brochures, communications, social media, you name it. If you're aligned with the sales team, you're probably going to be a lot more focused on just doing proposals. And so that's something to consider. Some people find that their proposal positions are actually embedded within the segment or division of the business. And those might also have potential for more work beyond just the proposal work. They may need you to help with division communications and that kind of thing. On the other hand, if you're really embedded within a segment of the business, it might also give you an opportunity to really get deep into the subject matter and become more of a subject matter expert, where you're doing a lot more writing and contributing technical content in addition to managing the overall process. Another question to look at when you're looking for your next proposal job is the sorts of tools that the company uses for proposal development and proposal collaboration. So on proposal development, there's a whole range of what firms use. Some of them do everything in Microsoft, whether it's proposals in Word, proposals in PowerPoint, Excel, Teams, and SharePoint. Others are Google Shops and you're using Gmail and Google Slides. And if you're not used to working in that environment, it might be a little bit of a learning curve for you. Others might be using Adobe. Adobe's got its own work management tools and Workfront, collaborates with InDesign. And so if you're in a company that's a lot more graphic design heavy, within the proposal role, then you might expect those to be the sorts of tools you use. But you want to find out what's available, what the company uses, and that'll give you a sense of what your day-to-day responsibilities are going to be when it comes to actually putting the proposal deliverables together. You always want to find out what people who work for the company think about their colleagues. And what do I mean by that? When they talk about working with subject matter experts, do they say it's painful, or do they say it's fun because they get to learn from so many smart people? If they're talking about working with finance and contracts and some of the other functions, same thing. Are they dragging information and forms they need out of them, or is it very collaborative and they really feel like they're partners? You want to ask these questions as you're going through the interviewing process. And then finally, you always want to ask about how they define their own proposal process. And that'll help give you a sense on whether it's very systematic, very regimented, they're all on the same page with a process that everybody knows, they've got a written playbook, or is it a bit more, by the seat of the pants? Are they still trying to figure out what their procedures are even while they're doing them? Again, there's pluses and minuses to both. Sometimes if you come in with a lot of fresh ideas and you join a company that's been doing it the same way for 100 years, it may be harder to drive change. On the other hand, some people prefer a position where they're told this is your rule book, follow it, and then they're happy. So know what sort of environment works for you, and then try to figure out what environment matches that.
Tracy, well, number one, let's pass it up to Kimberly real quick because Kimberly's hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just really wanted to piggyback on that. That's a great point, Tracy, about asking about the work environment. I was anytime I hire anyone, I'm very transparent about where we are at in the phase, and like the current company we're at. I believe I always use the term like we're in our teenage stage, right? We're going through a lot of growing pains, a lot of like movement. And I think that if you are the one being interviewed, it's a really great way to see like how transparent that department and or company will also be with you when it comes to other things also. So I think it works as a really good gauge, and it's an excellent question to ask.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Getting clear on what you want as an employee. If you take one thing away from this slide, I think, right? That seems like what Tracy is really, anyway, very excited about that. Next slide.
Yeah, you have to know what the right fit is going to be for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's move on now and talk about landing a role and some different types of roles within the proposal field. So I'd say there's a million different proposal roles and, probably 1.5 million different titles. But if I were to try to boil it down into 3 buckets, which I tried to do, I would say they fall into proposal management and coordination, writing and content management, and graphic design and desktop publishing. So the first one is really about the process. The middle one is about the content. And the third is polishing that content to help provide a compelling message to make it easier for the person doing the selection to select your team. So on the proposal management and coordination, I try to look at what these roles require and what some key skills are that you should be bringing to the role or be looking for in your applicants. And so when it comes to management and coordination, a lot of our proposal coordinators who are really strong are they're serving as a junior proposal manager, where they're following the same process. They're helping the proposal manager. They're performing proposal management tasks that they know need to be done, ideally even before the proposal manager asks them to do it, just because they know that's what the next step is. So they're both leading on process. The proposal manager will probably be more involved in advising on content. And that could be, from the standpoint of developing the outline for your submittal, making sure you've got all of the compliant requirements in there, and then facilitating the reviews. But for both of them, some of the key skills you need are organization, attention to detail, and the ability to basically herd cats. You're going to have to work with a number of different personalities. So you got to have a thick skin, and you got to be able to stand up and say, this is what I need, and I'm not ending this meeting until you agree to take this action item. On the writing and content management, there's a whole range of roles here. And from the writing standpoint, you have people who are more of the quals writers who can write about your company experience, past performance, maybe write staffing approaches that describe why your 3 people are the best ones that the client could possibly ask for in this job. There's editing that goes along with that. The larger your company gets, there's also a need to manage libraries of content. So what that could include your libraries of resumes, project experience, past performance evaluations that you've gotten from your clients or quotes they've provided about how great your work is. But also you want to start to compile elements of your approaches that could be reused. So say you have a company policy that describes your quality control procedures. Well, a lot of proposals are going to ask for some version of that explanation. It'll need to be tailored a bit so that it's, speaking to an external reviewer and not a company employee. But you want to start to build up that sort of content in your library as well. And a writer or editor can help you with those tasks. So when you're looking at people for these roles, they need to demonstrate that they can write and edit, of course. Some other skills that are helpful would be great memory. I had a content manager who I swear had a photographic memory, and every review, somebody would ask her, where was that proposal where we had this approach and we had the graphic that looked like the zigzag, and she'd be like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And she'd find it within 5 seconds. I mean, if you're lucky enough that you can find somebody like that, really valuable on your team. And if they can think in categories where they're able to just sort of like process quickly how to sort and store information in a way that's easy for people to find, then that's even better. For graphic design, desktop publishing, proposal formatting, et cetera, this is all about the really critical staff who lay out your documents, develop your graphics, and they also should be helping to advise on readability. What do I mean by that? They should be making it easy so that, say you're preparing a proposal for a state government agency, you're going to submit it through their portal. They're going to print it out, and they don't have the funding to buy more colored ink cartridges, so they're going to print it out in black and white. Make sure your graphics allow for that. They should be helping you with that sort of information. They should know about accessibility. If you're creating an online digital product, they should know what colors and fonts, et cetera, are acceptable or not. And you want to rely on this group for formatting, for graphic design. And if you've got somebody really skilled, they'll also be able to help you turn words and concepts into graphics that can really save you a lot of space and words in your proposal. Now, depending on the type of company that you work for, you may be small enough where you have to combine all of these things in one person. We'll hit on this a bit later, but again, you want to think about what the most critical skill is and try to build that position around that, knowing that it's really hard to find somebody who is going to excel at all 3 of these functions.
Yeah, Tracy, we've got a really good comment in the chat here, where Jennifer is telling us that she can do most of this with the exception of writing, and it's hard to find a proposal position without the writing aspect. Do either of you have an experience where you see somebody who's like mostly a coordinator, and what kind of company where some would have a role like that? Do you have a concept of that?
So I've seen proposal departments that are very large, where they have staff who are dedicated writers, dedicated graphic designers, and have capture managers, solution architects, people who do a lot of the technical writing so that the proposal managers don't have to. What I have found is that the writing can take care of itself almost if you're very thorough when you put together your outline, and if you take that outline to the next level in terms of creating an annotated page mock-up, where instead of just having a 1-page outline for your 20-page section, you mock up what the 20 pages would look like. On this page, I want to have a graphic that shows this and a description of this process. On the next page, I want to have a table that lists all of the projects where we've done that before. And so if you can sort of chunk it out into pieces, you can tackle one thing at a time. It's not as daunting of a task as if you were to just start feeling like you have to write 20 pages from scratch. It's so much easier to just do like one task at a time. And some of them you can even assign to other people to go find that information. So it depends. You know, if you're in a smaller company, you're generally going to be expected to do a lot more writing now, because they just aren't going to have the resources.
Yeah, so I've worked in a few different places where we were kind of a little bit more privileged enough to have this coordinator role that didn't really involve as much writing, very little to no writing. And I would say, like, if you are someone who is looking for a role that has little to no writing, but you still want to be in the proposal industry, a few good questions maybe to ask on your interviews or to ask those people would be, how developed is their content library? Do they have a content library? How developed is that content library? How, what is their experience with their subject matter expert? And I think that can be across any industry. But if you're asking those kinds of key questions around content that is already built out, that might help you know, kind of gauge a little bit better how much writing would be involved with that specific company and role.
Oh, very insightful questions. Great. Thank you, Kimberly. All right, are we on to the next?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So now you've narrowed down what sort of role you're looking for, the type of company. So put your plan together. You want to create some targets. Are you looking at small companies, large companies? You want to go to an established company or a startup? Are you going to proposal management or content? And really try to be firm with your targets. It's not really a good use of your time to submit a bunch of resumes to companies that you don't intend to work for. So if you have set your sights on a large company, don't waste your time or the recruiter's time at a small company. I don't believe in interviewing for practice, right? You should be able to find people in your network that you can interview for practice. Speaking of networks, use those networks. There are groups such as Pi that have extensive networks. We have a lot of job postings on the site. I've posted a lot of our openings there, and for colleagues of mine, use your connections on LinkedIn. Use your alumni groups. Don't be shy. Nobody, I think, is really, shy about networking. I get random emails on LinkedIn all the time, people asking about the company I work for or how to get into the proposal business. And most people are really good about taking questions and calls, and will make time for you. It's maybe not an hour, but they'll be happy to give you, 10 or 15 minutes just to get you started. Always tailor your resume and cover letter for the job, and try not to have errors in it, especially if you're applying for a proposal job. Attention to detail is part of this job, and it is something that I look at very critically. I can be pretty harsh, and if I see 3 typos in the first paragraph of a resume, out. I'm not going to spend my time on that person. So let's go on to the next one. So want to talk a bit about ways that you can get the hiring manager's attention, and talk a bit more about the cover letter. At my last position, one of the applicants that really stood out the most to me was somebody who had taken the time to put together a 10-page package that had a cover letter, a resume, and then lots of graphics, and her splash page with her anchor graphic and win themes about, what made her the best for the position. It was really exciting to see somebody who had spent that much time customizing her submittal for the company, which made it clear, this wasn't done on a lark. She was really interested in the role. It showed she knew the job, because she knew the pieces that tend to go into a typical proposal. And if it hadn't been for several typos, I would have really been excited to interview her. But again, I can't understate how important it is not to have typos in our materials. We want to see resumes that are focused on your results, your achievements, and use data. Don't just say I was the lead proposal manager for my division. I want to know, what was the biggest proposal that you led? How many did you do on an average annual basis? What types of services were the proposals for? What types of deliverables did you create? For example, were they 150-page Adobe InDesign documents, or were they 10-page PowerPoints? There's a big difference in the types of deliverables we do, and depending on the position, you might need to show different types of skills. And again, proofread, spell check, proofread, spell check. I saw a question pop up. I did not personally provide feedback, but I did give that feedback to the recruiter and asked our recruiter to pass it on, because I did want them to know that while I appreciated the effort, the attention to detail, including QC of one's own work, is a non-negotiable skill. So let's go to the next one. And Kimberly, do you want to talk a bit about resume and cover letter do's and don'ts?
Yeah, I really had just a comment on this particular slide. Of one thing I really like to see in resumes is use of kind of industry buzzwords. I find that really helpful and displays industry specific knowledge. If you are attuned to a specific, or if you are trying to align to a specific vertical like healthcare or construction or something like that. And also there are transferable buzzwords, like in our industry, we often use MIDI, right? Minority owned, women owned business enterprises. Just the use of those buzzwords really signifies professional experience and knowledge of the industry.
Exactly. I agree with that. I do have a slide later where I'm going to touch on that and just make sure that while you want to show your industry knowledge, you just don't want to go over the top with the jargon and, overwhelm people with alphabet soup, which we especially see in the public sector space. So a few points on the resumes, and some of these are repetitive. I thought this would be a good takeaway slide. Always tailor your job for each, or your resume for each job you're applying for. Make sure you're giving yourself credit for your achievements and not just your responsibilities. Always write a cover letter that explains why you should be selected for that position. I can't tell you, there have been a number of people where I initially was not going to give them a chance based on their resume, because I had a hard time making the connection between their past jobs and the role that I had open. But when they took the time to explain, well, you're looking for somebody who has experience in this industry, and I bring X, Y, and Z, and you need somebody who is a good writer and editor, and this is where I've done that on these jobs, and even received an award for something, make it really easy for the hiring manager to understand why they should take a look at you. A lot of these jobs, there are dozens and dozens of applicants coming in, and you want to float to the top of the pile. Make it really easy, not only for the hiring manager, but also for the recruiters who might not be as familiar with the type of role and know why your experience is relevant. I think I covered spell checking, but again, it comes down to when you're applying for a proposal or writing related position, we consider your entire application package to be a preview of the type of work you're going to do when you're hired. And so that's why that attention to detail is important. If you're applying for a design position, we expect to see good quality design in your resume. Even if it's going to be scanned by a computer and go into a database, we're still going to be looking for that PDF attachment that comes with it to get a sense of your design skills. So keep all of that in mind. Next slide, we're going to talk a bit about how we look at skills and then personalities and mindset. So when we look at skills, we want to see if you've got the skills to do the job, but we also want to take a look at any additional skills you have. For example, we might do 90% of our proposals in Word. And so if that's the case, we would expect you to demonstrate that you've got skills in Word. But if you're also proficient in working in InDesign and PowerPoint, we want to know that too, because we might have those 10% of proposals that are in InDesign and PowerPoint, and we might really need somebody on our team because maybe nobody else knows InDesign yet. Are you fluent in another language? You know, we might not have put this in the job description, but it might be that, you know, our team in Europe or Latin America is short-staffed. And so if you can speak French or Spanish fluently, that could be a bonus to us that we weren't necessarily thinking of when we wrote that job description. Also, if you've served in another role, such as contracts, finance, or if you've been a consultant, don't hide that in your resume and make it sound like you've only done proposal work. That other type of experience is actually really helpful to us, because contracts are a big part of proposals. If you've been in finance, you know, you might be a great asset when it comes to the pricing. And if you've been a consultant in the same industry, then you might be able to contribute a great deal to the actual approach and solution development. When it comes to the mindset and personality, you know, again, proposals are a team sport. So we need to know that you can work well with others. We need to know that you can communicate, and that's something that's going to be important as we talk during the interview process. Proposals are not all the same. The instructions are different. Lots of times they're not very good, they're confusing. And so we need people who can work in situations where, you know, the rules are not clear. And, you know, people need to be not afraid to ask for help or ask for guidance or ask for clarification. You know, we don't want you to sit back there and say, oh, I'm going to figure this all out by myself based on my 1 month of experience. No. Please come ask for help, because there are a lot of people who have been through this before, and we don't want you to be afraid to ask. Finally, we really need people who have positive attitudes and think, I can do this. Because there are so many times in the proposal field where people don't meet deadlines, they don't give you what you need. They don't come through because they're, you know, pulled into a client emergency and they don't have time for you. That we always have to come up with a plan B. And so we need to know that you're that type of person who can help find that plan B and just really roll with the punches and not get torn down by it. Okay, let's go. Okay, so there's a ton of positions that are transferable to proposal writing and vice versa for that matter. We've hired people who have come from backgrounds in quality assurance, quality control, technical writing, copy editing. I've hired a couple great proposal managers who were journalists in their prior careers. Had some great coordinators and managers who were teachers, again, used to herding cats and dealing with, you know, people with kindergartners' personalities and attention span, as well as people from sales and marketing. And it goes back to the skills you're looking for. Are you looking for someone with project management skills or writing or collaboration or that industry knowledge? So be open-minded. It's not all about finding, you know, somebody with 10 years of proposal management experience.
Kimberly, I'm curious on your take on this too. Have you hired some people with unusual backgrounds in your time, or have they mostly been proposal folks?
No, I have hired for different backgrounds that were proposal adjacent often. So one great example is I hired someone who came from the services team. So they were doing like active customer implementations, designing those plans. They were used to working customer facing, which wasn't part of the proposal job, but it meant that they knew how to word and phrase things in ways that were relatable to customers. They also had the skill to build visual presentations of what an implementation plan would look like. So I have hired from a variety of different adjacent departments, that just being a good, really solid example of how that can work or how skills can be transferable back and forth. And it's really what your team needs. Like, what does this team need?
Yeah, and I know that I am being sensitive to time, but I did see a really good question come up here in the chat, where Ruba is saying that in their experience, when you demonstrate other experiences and skills, the hiring managers question if you're committed enough to being in a proposal role. I was asked once if I will be committed to the position that I have because I have previous marketing and business development experience. So I would say that that's a fearful manager who just doesn't really necessarily understand how to hire to get the best team. Do y'all agree that's on the manager for having a perspective that isn't helpful?
Yes and no. I mean, I've hired people who have been in more business development roles for proposal manager roles. And when I hired them, it was, sort of thinking, I don't know if this is going to work out. The role they're used to playing was more external, where they had a lot of travel and meeting with teaming partners. And, are they really going to be happy sitting in the office working in Word documents all day long? And I asked that question during the interview because I really wanted to make sure. And we gave that person a chance, and in less than a year, he moved on. And then when we backfilled that position, we had someone who also came from a similar background. And I did not want to go through that again, but the hiring manager on my team wanted to give her a chance. And sure enough, within a year, she was gone. So, but I've also seen other times where it has worked out. And so I think, what you need to do is make the case for why you are passionate about proposals and why this is the role that you sincerely want. Looking back, neither one of them really did it. I think it was clear that they just needed a job, and they took that one in the hopes that they would get back into a business development role.
Really
so that's my take.
Yeah, Kimberly?
Yeah, I would use that as a great segue into a deeper conversation with that manager, right? Like, okay, that leads me to a great question. Is your team very, are you have a smaller, more agile team? Is it a larger corporation? I mean, I have 100 questions that come from that. Like, is it a larger corporation with very set roles and boundaries, right? And so I think that can segue into a deeper conversation about what both of you are looking for. Yeah.
Ultimately, it's really important to find out something that fits both of you, not just you showing up and making some money, but everybody benefiting, right? And I think that kind of showcases, both of your answers showcase that let's make sure that everybody's having a good time here and we're lessening our risk of turnover for everyone. Absolutely. Okay, so with about 15 minutes left, we are going to launch into finding the right team. So am I good to go ahead to the next slide, Tracy?
Yeah, that's actually a great segue to this next topic, which is about finding the right balance for your organization. So again, if you've got a smaller company and a smaller proposal team, it might be harder to strike that balance just because you're not able to hire as many people. But when you've got a larger team, there's, again, I've created 3 buckets, and this is how I'm thinking about things, but I'm looking for 3 things. So subject matter expertise. Now, this doesn't mean I expect everybody to come from a scientific or, technology background in the proposal team. It means maybe I expect that they've worked with similar customers, selling similar services, so they know the jargon. They know what the typical process is to get from X to Z, that sort of thing. They've been around it enough to know, if what's in this technical approach makes sense, or if somebody's just writing garbage. There needs to be key functional skills. Sometimes this is the primary driver. You need somebody who can run the process. You need somebody who can oversee the writing, editing, graphics, and production. You need somebody to coach the orals. But those sorts of skills are also some that you can train if you've got people who are heavy in the other 2 areas. So the company and market knowledge can't, it seems to get forgotten sometimes, but it is so helpful when you've got somebody who knows your market sector, they know the competitors, they've worked with the same customers, they understand why the clients buy the way they do. That is also extremely valuable to anybody on your proposal team. And if you can find somebody who's really got all of these skills, then imagine that unicorn icon there in the middle of the Venn diagram. That's your winner there. Let's go to the next slide.
But do you mind if we'll pause and
Oh,
we'll go really quick, but Kimberly just scaled your team up from 2 to 6 or 7, right? So was there one of these that kind of sticks out in your mind as something that you think is particularly important as you were making that happen?
Yeah, and really my big comment to this whole section and several of the slides that I think Tracy's going to get to later is when I was building this team or imagining this team, we really asked the question of where do you want this team to be in 5 years, right? Like if you could have your ideal team in 5 years, how would you begin to build that out? So it really built off of that foundation of where do we want this team to be? What roles do we want this team to be on this team in an ideal situation in 5 years? And you're not always going to have that luxury, right? Like sometimes you just need a content editor, like, you need someone who can write content well. And that's just like a really hard line. In my particular case, I did have a little bit of, since we were hiring so many roles, there was flexibility. And I think that's a great question to ask as a candidate. Also, asking the hiring manager, are you hiring multiple roles? Is there flexibility within your team? And so that really helped me because I was able to be flexible in the different roles that I was looking for and these different skills. And I could kind of hire one person and then readjust and to keep me on track for this kind of like 5-year ideal projection team.
So hiring with the end goal in mind for what our 5-year plan looks like. Fantastic. That's a brilliant comment.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. All right, we're on to the next.
all right. So once you've identified what sorts of skills, what sort of experience you're looking for, you want to make sure that you sell the job in a way that you're appealing to the audience you want. So what do I mean by that? If you're looking for somebody with really specialized experience, then you might want to call this role a senior proposal manager for the Department of Defense, right? If you need those really specific skill sets. And you want to go into details about the sorts of work they'll need to do. If you're looking at your proposal manager as somebody who's going to be part of a broader team, who's also going to have responsibilities for creating marketing brochures and supporting events, then you want to give them a broader title like marketing communications manager. Depending on the job market where you are, you may have a harder time finding that really specific skill. And so you might want to post a broader job just so that you can open it up to more people to respond to. I've seen some companies that post a job as a proposal manager and then and don't get a lot of interest. And then you change it, just change the title to marketing communications writer. And all of a sudden you've got like 10 applicants the next day. So you can make adjustments too, even while you're in the recruiting process, if you're not getting the sort of response you want. The description for the job, while it's really helpful when you get the resumes back to see that people understand the industry jargon, you don't always want to include a lot of it in the actual job description because, again, you want to provide a bit of broader appeal. When you're trying to reach a big audience, you don't want to scare people away by having too much government-ese or too many acronyms that they don't understand, where they feel like, well, I don't even know what this position is about because I don't understand what half the words are. So, use broader phrases like quality reviews instead of color team reviews, and talk about government forms instead of SF330 forms or things like that. And then finally, one thing that has really become almost more important than anything else in recruiting in the last few years has been location. Nearly everybody that I've been able to hire since COVID started has expressed that they were looking for at least a hybrid position, if not a fully remote position. It is really hard to find proposal managers who are willing to go into the office 5 days a week. And if that's something that you're requiring, just know off the bat that you're going to get a limited pool of applicants, because most companies are not requiring that anymore. So where do you look? Look inside your company, look at your competitors, and look at your networks. Within your company, if you've got a big company who have people who are known as resource managers, whose job it is to make sure that everybody stays busy, ask them if they've got people on the bench who might have the right sort of skills, or maybe are looking for a change in their career. There might be people in other departments, such as administration, contracts, HR, who have been involved with proposals, from some aspect, and want to make that a full-time position. Maybe you've got some prior interns or even prior employees who are interested in a job. I will say one caveat on hiring people back after they've left the company. I have done that a handful of times, and almost none of those times have the people stayed in the long term. And the reason why is the reason they left in the first place was still there when they came back. So if the situation that caused them to leave hasn't changed, they're not going to stick around the second time either. And that situation could be workload, it could be manager, it could be internal clients, it could be any combination of those things. But just know that if you're bringing people back to a situation that they left, unless you change the situation or completely change their role, they're probably not going to stick around when they return. Competitors, if you've got companies that you've teamed with and proposal managers who have impressed you, have your recruiters call them or reach out to them on LinkedIn and say, hey, I've got an opening. I would love to have you come work with us. They might not have seen your job listing. They might not have thought about leaving, but maybe because you're reaching out to them, they might. And don't just look at the direct competitors. There could be smaller or larger companies that do what you do, who have good staff there as well, who can also add a lot of value. And use your networks. LinkedIn, that's what it's for. Use your professional associations like PI, use your alumni groups, other social networks. I've had people apply to jobs at my company after I shared them with my friends on Facebook. Don't be shy. All right, I'm going to try to breeze through this quickly so we have time for questions. Once you've got your candidates, you want to interview them and really make sure that they're going to be a good fit. So you want to look at their functional skills. Again, look at their application package as an example of their work. And you want to ask them a lot of open-ended questions to make sure that they can explain or demonstrate how well they know the job. So ask them to describe the process they follow for managing a proposal. That'll give you a clue really quickly as to whether they actually know it or they just say they know it. Another good one is to ask them what to do or when a proposal is in trouble. That'll give you an idea of have they really been in that situation before, and how do they handle that within an organization? Do they handle it well or not? You always want to see if they're going to fit with the other personalities on their team. So let them have the opportunity to talk with some of the peers they'd be working with, as well as some of their internal clients. If you're hiring for a leadership role, have them talk to your boss. The hardest thing that I think to figure out is whether somebody's likely to stay once they've joined your company. So you need to understand why they're leaving. You want to know what they're looking for, not only in their next employer, but also in their career. And ask them bluntly, like, are there any deal breakers? Some people might say, for example, I absolutely cannot work past 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon because I have to go out of town every weekend to take care of my mom. Okay, that's pretty easy to work around, right? But you want to know those things in advance because you want to offer them the flexibility if they're the right candidate.
Yeah, Tracy, I know that we've got a fair amount of content that still remains here. And what I'd love to propose to you, to the folks here, and to the people who are listening is that there's a part two. Because what
Yeah.
I'd love to dive into a little bit more deeper or more deeply and with more intention is that career pathing and capacity planning piece. So if you're comfortable with that, folks who are listening, we're going to plan a part two with the same lineup here. And I'd love to give Kimberly an opportunity to respond to this as well. Yeah, Caitlin's excited. She says, "Yay, part two." So what I'd love to hear from Kimberly here is do you agree that these are great questions? How would you make any changes to these comments?
Yeah, I think so. I posted in the chat. It's just the question of what would being able to provide this candidate with scenarios and then listening to how they would handle that scenario or how they would handle when a proposer is in trouble. It was oftentimes a very good way for me to get a temperature check without being offensive, right? Like as proposal managers, we also have a responsibility to be respectful to the candidates that are applying. And I have been in situations where I was the candidate and that was not the case. And so I do love to keep that in mind, and just giving them scenarios and the opportunity to have free flowing conversation is a really respectful way to do that. I feel that lends them creativity and the way to best portray their skills and attributes.
And someone I've been a hiring manager in the past as well. And I was absolutely shocked because I thought that there was going to kind of be this standard answer that people would bring forward, like, oh, I'll be collaborative, I'll be helpful. And I was floored, for those of you who are listening and for those of you who are looking to hire, at how many boldly adversarial answers I got to that question. Like, I would never have expected people to actually be like, I'd put the hammer down and like tell them they had to get their work done. And we said, this is like, obviously you're not a good fit. So be prepared if you're just entering into that hiring manager space to like actually be shocked with what people will say. I don't know if anybody else here has had that same experience.
Oh yeah.
Yes, you have to work on your facial expressions.
It's the time I've had to go off camera.
Right.
Excuse me for a second. Yeah, this is absolutely true. Okay, so we have about 1 minute left. So thank you to everybody who's joining us so far. So what we are intending to do for this next session, as long as the folks here again are happy to join us for that, is we'll talk about capacity planning, and we'll talk about what an ideal RFP department looks like and how to build out those career paths a little bit more intentionally. So I am going to just go ahead and skip to the last slide here. Spoiler alert: if anybody here on our presentation today is not already part of our community at Proposal Industry Experts, I urge you strongly to join PI. I saw a lot of great questions coming down the pipeline in the chat that if you ask those, if you reinforce them by going over into PI and asking our experts there, I guarantee you're going to get really great questions. We had some asks about how to get into consulting and how to develop our career from that perspective. If you've got those questions, put them in PI. All of our folks, including Tracy and Kimberly, are in the platform. And in fact, Tracy is on our customer advisory board called our Baker's Dozen, and leading the charge to change the industry one baked good and proposal at a time. So thank you so much. This has been a really delightful session. I'm so glad that we got two very knowledgeable hiring managers on the horn today to tell you all about how to build out your team. Again, keep an eye out because we're going to bring you a part two, and it's so great to see everybody today. We will see you in the community. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.